The crystalline halls of the Zephyrian research station hummed with excitement as Dr. Kexthar adjusted his optical sensors for the 100th time that cycle. The discovery floating in the containment field before him defied everything his species had learned about the extinct humans in the past 3 centuries. "Remarkable preservation," whispered his assistant, Velnara, her tentacles quivering with scientific anticipation. "The cryogenic systems are still functional after all this time." The human specimen lay suspended in an advanced stasis pod, its design far more sophisticated than anything the Galactic Coalition had encountered in the ruins of Earth. Unlike the skeletal remains and decomposed bodies found in other human settlements, this one appeared to have been frozen at the moment of peak physical condition. The being was massive by human standards, standing nearly 2 meters tall with dense muscle structure, visible even through the preservation suit. Kexthar's research team had been exploring the outer rim of the Sol system for months, cataloging the remnants of humanity's failed expansion attempts. The species had supposedly died out during their primitive nuclear age, victims of their own violent tendencies. At least that was what the Coalition's xenoarchaeologists had concluded from the scarred remains of Earth and its scattered colonies. But this discovery challenged everything. The facility they had found, hidden in an asteroid belt, was unlike any human construction previously documented. It was buried deep within a hollowed-out planetoid, shielded by layers of advanced metallurgy and energy dampeners that had kept it hidden from Coalition surveys for 300 years. The technology was clearly human in origin, but it operated on principles that shouldn't have been possible for such a primitive species. "Look at these readings," Velnara said, her voice carrying a note of confusion. "The neural activity indicators show the brain is still functioning at minimal levels. This isn't just preservation, it's active suspension." Kexthar examined the data streams flowing across his console. The humans' biological systems were maintaining themselves through some form of controlled hibernation. More disturbing were the physical augmentations visible through detailed scans. Metallic implants reinforced the skeletal structure, synthetic muscle fibers interwove with natural tissue, and the nervous system showed signs of electronic enhancement. "This contradicts every historical record," Kexthar muttered, his translator struggling with his excitement. Humans were supposed to be technologically inferior. They barely achieved faster-than-light travel before their extinction. The truth was more unsettling than either scientist wanted to admit. The Galactic Coalition had built its understanding of humanity on incomplete evidence. They had found the aftermath of wars, the remnants of failed colonies, and the scarred surface of Earth. But they had never found anything like this facility or this perfectly preserved specimen. Velnara's tentacles danced over the control interface as she accessed the facility's databanks. Most of the information was corrupted or encoded in formats their translation systems couldn't decipher, but what they could read painted a picture of humanity that challenged Coalition doctrine. "Military designation, Sergeant Marcus Chen, Enhanced Operations Division," she read aloud. "Service record indicates participation in something called the Titan campaigns and deployment to..." "I can't translate this designation. The linguistic algorithms don't recognize the terminology." The more they learned, the more questions arose. The facility's construction suggested a level of engineering sophistication that rivaled current Coalition technology. The preservation systems were running on power sources that showed no signs of degradation after centuries of operation. Most troubling of all, the security systems were still active, responding to their presence with increasing agitation. Kexthar made his decision with the impulsiveness that had defined his career. "We're taking the specimen back to the research station. The Coalition Xenobiological Division needs to see this." The extraction process took several days. The human stasis pod was integrated into the facility systems in ways that suggested it was never meant to be moved. But Zephyrian engineering proved equal to the challenge. And soon the mysterious sleeper was secured in their ship's specialized cargo bay. During the journey back to Coalition space, both scientists found themselves obsessing over their discovery. The implications were staggering. If humans had possessed this level of technology, why had they failed to prevent their own extinction? Why were there no records of these enhanced soldiers in any of the Coalition's historical databases? The answer, they would later realize, was that the Coalition's understanding of human extinction was fundamentally flawed. Upon arrival at the main research station, News of the discovery spread quickly through the scientific community. Xenobiologists, historians, and military analysts all clamored for access to the specimen. The human was transferred to the station's most advanced medical facility, where teams of researchers began planning the revival process. Dr. Zilkoth, the station's chief medical officer, expressed reservations about the plan. Reviving an unknown biological entity carries significant risks, he argued during the planning sessions. We have no understanding of human psychology, especially one that has been modified to this extent. But scientific curiosity overwhelmed caution. The opportunity to question a living human about their civilization's history was too valuable to pass up. Coalition historians had countless questions about humanity's rapid technological development and sudden disappearance. This soldier might hold answers that had eluded them for centuries. The revival process began 3 days after the specimen's arrival at the station. Coalition medical technology was advanced enough to safely reverse the cryogenic suspension, though the human's enhanced physiology presented unexpected challenges. The synthetic components in his body required specialized treatment protocols that had to be developed on the fly. As the thawing process continued, monitoring equipment registered increasing brain activity. Whatever dreams or memories had sustained Marcus Chen through 3 centuries of sleep were beginning to give way to consciousness. His vital signs strengthened, his enhanced cardiovascular system resuming its function with mechanical precision. None of the coalition scientists understood what they were truly awakening. Their record spoke of humans as a failed species, technologically primitive and self-destructive. They expected to revive a confused, grateful survivor who would be awed by coalition achievements and eager to share his knowledge. They had no way of knowing that Marcus Chen was one of humanity's ultimate weapons, a soldier enhanced for warfare against enemies far more dangerous than anything the coalition had ever encountered. They couldn't comprehend that his 3-century sleep had been voluntary, part of a contingency plan developed by military minds that had foreseen possibilities beyond coalition imagination. As the final stages of revival began, alarms started sounding throughout the medical facility. The human's brain patterns were unlike anything in coalition databases, showing activity levels that suggested consciousness far beyond baseline human norms. His physical responses to the awakening process indicated strength and speed that defied biological possibility. In the observation room, Dr. Thaw watched the monitors with growing unease. Something was wrong. The human's eyes had opened, but there was no confusion or disorientation. Instead, there was immediate assessment, calculation, and something that looked disturbingly like tactical analysis. Marcus Chen was awake, and the coalition was about to learn why humanity's military had developed soldiers like him. Marcus Chen's eyes snapped open like the activation of a weapon system. There was no gradual return to consciousness, no confused blinking or disorientation that the coalition scientists had expected. One moment the monitors showed deep suspension patterns. The next they registered full alertness with neural activity that made their equipment struggle to keep pace. Dr. Kexathar leaned forward in the observation room. His optical sensors focused on the revival chamber. Fascinating. The transition to consciousness is instantaneous. No gradual awakening phase. Below them, Marcus remained perfectly still on the medical table, but his eyes moved with mechanical precision as he cataloged every detail of his surroundings. The enhanced soldiers of the Human Enhanced Operations Division had been trained to assess threats and tactical situations within seconds of awakening, even from cryosleep. 3 centuries of suspension had done nothing to diminish these reflexes. The medical bay's design immediately told Marcus everything he needed to know. The technology was advanced but unfamiliar, suggesting significant time had passed since his deployment. The atmosphere composition readings on nearby displays showed a standard nitrogen-oxygen mix suitable for humans. But the architecture and equipment design were clearly non-human in origin. Dr. Zilkoth entered the revival chamber with 2 medical assistants, their movements careful and deliberate. The Coalition's xenobiological protocols required extreme caution when dealing with unknown species, even supposedly extinct ones. They approached the table with instruments designed to monitor vital signs and neurological responses. "Can you understand me?" Zilkoth asked, his translator working to convert his native language into what their databases suggested was standard human communication. Marcus said nothing. His enhanced auditory systems were already analyzing the acoustic properties of the room, identifying the location of ventilation systems, calculating the thickness of walls, and mapping potential exit routes. The coalition scientists interpreted his silence as confusion or inability to comprehend their communication attempts. "Perhaps the translation matrix needs adjustment," suggested one of the assistants. "Human linguistic patterns may have degraded during the suspension period." What they couldn't know was that Marcus understood them perfectly. His neural implants included advanced translation protocols developed during humanity's expansion phase. More importantly, his enhanced cognitive systems were processing information at rates that would have seemed impossible to baseline humans. In the minutes since awakening, he had already determined his captor's species classifications, estimated their physical capabilities, and begun formulating tactical responses. The Coalition's medical equipment continued its gentle probing, sensors attempting to establish baselines for human physiology. Each scan revealed more details about Marcus's augmented systems, though the researchers struggled to understand the sophistication of what they were seeing. "These neural implants are far more advanced than our historical records suggested," Velnara observed from the observation room. "The integration with biological systems is seamless. How did such a primitive species achieve this level of enhancement?" Marcus finally spoke, his voice carefully modulated to project cooperation rather than threat. "Where am I?" The question sent excitement through the research team. First contact with a living human was finally happening. Dr. Zilkoth adjusted his translator and responded with what he hoped was a reassuring tone. "You are safe aboard. Coalition Research Station HFY. I am Dr. Zilkoth, Chief Medical Officer. You have been in some form of suspended animation for a very long time. We found you in a hidden facility and brought you here for revival." Marcus processed this information, while maintaining his facade of confusion and gratitude. The term coalition suggested political unification among multiple species. The casual mention of finding him in a hidden facility indicated they had breached one of the EOD's secure installations. Most critically, their assumption that he had been accidentally preserved rather than deliberately deployed told him they knew nothing about humanity's true capabilities. "How long?" Marcus asked, allowing a note of concern to enter his voice. "Approximately 300 of your years," Zilkoth replied. "I'm afraid your species is believed to be extinct. Earth was found devastated by nuclear warfare, and no living humans have been encountered until now." The information confirmed Marcus's worst fears and greatest hopes simultaneously. The cover protocol had worked perfectly. Humanity's extinction was the greatest deception his species had ever achieved, allowing them to disappear completely from galactic attention while pursuing development paths that would have terrified other civilizations. "Extinct?" Marcus allowed his voice to break slightly, projecting the grief and shock that would be expected from a last survivor. "Everyone is gone?" The coalition scientists exchanged glances that Marcus's enhanced peripheral vision caught immediately. They were pleased with his response, interpreting it as confirmation of their historical understanding. None of them suspected that his apparent emotional distress was carefully calculated performance. Dr. Thar entered the medical bay, eager to begin the questioning that would hopefully resolve centuries of unanswered questions about human civilization. "Sergeant Chen, according to your service records, you were part of something called the Enhanced Operations Division. Can you tell us about this organization?" Marcus's mind raced through contingency protocols. The EOD had prepared for countless scenarios, including discovery by alien civilizations. His current situation fell under Protocol 7, Deep Cover Reconnaissance. He was to gather intelligence about the current state of galactic civilization, while revealing as little as possible about humanity's true nature. "I don't remember much," Marcus lied smoothly. "The enhancement process, it affected memory formation, training, basic combat operations, but the details are fragmented." This was partially true. EOD soldiers did experience some memory fragmentation as a side effect of their neural modifications, but Marcus's recollection was nearly perfect, enhanced by redundant storage systems that preserved critical information even through extended cryosleep. "Combat operations against what enemies?" pressed Kexthar. Coalition records show no evidence of significant threats in human space during your historical period. The question revealed how little the Coalition understood about the universe beyond their borders. Marcus's training had included briefings about entities and civilizations that the Coalition had apparently never encountered. Humanity's rapid militarization hadn't been driven by internal conflicts alone. "I remember fragments," Marcus said carefully. "Raids on outer colonies. Things coming from beyond the rim. Command called them. I can't recall the exact terms. The memories are too damaged." What he didn't reveal was that humanity had been fighting a shadow war against forces that made the Coalition's greatest military achievements look like children's games. The Enhanced Operations Division existed because, baseline, humans had proven inadequate against enemies that violated every assumption about biological and technological limitations. Dr. Zilkoth's medical scanners detected elevated stress responses in Marcus's system, which the researchers interpreted as emotional distress from traumatic memories. In reality, the readings reflected his combat systems maintaining readiness while his conscious mind processed the strategic implications of his situation. The questioning continued for hours, with Marcus carefully balancing revelation and concealment. He confirmed basic facts about human society that aligned with Coalition records, while obscuring anything that might suggest humanity's true technological and military capabilities. Every answer was calculated to reinforce their perception of humans as a tragically failed species. As the session progressed, Marcus began gathering critical intelligence about his captors. The Coalition appeared to be a peaceful alliance of species, focused on scientific advancement and resource sharing. Their military capabilities seemed limited to maintaining internal order, rather than defending against external threats. Most importantly, they showed no awareness of the dangers that had originally driven humanity's militarization. "You mentioned enhanced soldiers like yourself," Velnara asked during one exchange. "How many of these enhanced individuals existed?" "Not many," Marcus replied truthfully. "The program was expensive and dangerous. Most candidates didn't survive the modification process, maybe a few hundred successful conversions across the entire military." He neglected to mention that those few hundred enhanced soldiers had been capable of operations that could reshape entire star systems. The Coalition's gentle, curious approach to his revival would have been impossible if they understood what kind of weapon they had accidentally awakened. As the day's questioning concluded, Marcus was moved to quarters designed for long-term observation. The accommodations were comfortable by Coalition standards, with environmental controls adjusted for human physiology and access to their databases on human culture and history. Alone for the first time since awakening, Marcus allowed himself a slight smile. The Coalition had inadvertently provided him with everything he needed to assess the current state of galactic civilization. Their databases would tell him which species survived, which new threats had emerged, and most importantly, whether humanity's withdrawal from galactic affairs had achieved its intended purpose. The Enhanced Operations Division's mission parameters had been clear: ensure humanity's survival by any means necessary, even if it required the appearance of extinction. Marcus's awakening 3 centuries later suggested the cover protocol had succeeded beyond their greatest hopes. Now came the more complex challenge of determining whether humanity should remain hidden, or if the time had come to reveal what 3 centuries of isolation had accomplished. Either way, the Coalition was about to learn that their understanding of galactic history contained some very dangerous gaps. Marcus spent his first week aboard the Coalition research station, learning everything he could while maintaining his carefully constructed persona of confused survivor. The Coalition's databases contained 3 centuries of accumulated knowledge about galactic civilization, and every piece of information confirmed his growing understanding that humanity's disappearance had left significant gaps in their historical records. Dr. Kexthar visited daily, conducting what he believed were therapeutic sessions to help Marcus process his trauma and loss. In reality, these conversations provided Marcus with detailed intelligence about Coalition capabilities, territorial boundaries, and most importantly, their complete ignorance of the threats that had originally driven humanity's militarization. "The galaxy has been remarkably peaceful since your species' time," Kexthar explained during one session, his tentacles gesturing toward a holographic display of Coalition space. We've had minor territorial disputes and resource conflicts, but nothing approaching the warfare that seemed to characterize human civilization. Marcus nodded thoughtfully, projecting the appropriate mixture of sadness and curiosity. We always seemed to be fighting something. I remember that much. It felt like the threats never stopped coming. What he didn't reveal was that humanity's conflicts had never been with the species now comprising the Coalition. The enemies that had necessitated the Enhanced Operations Division operated from regions of space that the Coalition had never explored, using technologies that would have shattered their current understanding of physics and biology. The station's computer systems provided Marcus with additional intelligence through seemingly innocent requests for historical and cultural information. His enhanced neural implants could process data at rates that appeared normal to human observation, but were actually several orders of magnitude faster than baseline human capability. Within days, he had absorbed the equivalent of several universities' worth of information about current galactic civilization. The picture that emerged was both reassuring and concerning. The Coalition represented genuine advancement in interspecies cooperation and peaceful coexistence. Their technological development had progressed steadily in areas like medicine, communication, and resource management. However, their military capabilities had stagnated at levels that would have been considered primitive during humanity's active period. More troubling was what Marcus found in the gaps of Coalition knowledge. Entire regions of space remained unexplored, dismissed as dead zones or natural hazards by Coalition surveys. These were precisely the areas where humanity's enhanced forces had conducted their most classified operations. The fact that these regions remained untouched suggested either successful containment or dormant threats that could reactivate without warning. Dr. Velnara joined the daily sessions after Marcus's first week, bringing expertise in xenoarchaeology that she hoped would help piece together humanity's lost history. Her enthusiasm for the subject provided Marcus with opportunities to guide the conversation toward topics that served his intelligence gathering. Needs human expansion patterns puzzle our historians, she admitted during one discussion. Your species achieved faster than light travel relatively recently, yet we find evidence of human presence in systems that should have required centuries to reach. How do you explain this rapid expansion? Marcus had been waiting for this question. The Coalition's understanding of human FTL technology was based on examination of civilian vessels and commercial installations. They had never encountered military drives or the exotic propulsion systems developed by humanity's black projects. I remember hearing about experimental drives, Marcus said carefully, military projects that could achieve much faster travel times. But the technology was dangerous, limited to essential missions. This was true in a technical sense. Humanity's military had developed propulsion technologies that operated on principles the Coalition had never discovered. But calling them dangerous and limited significantly understated their capabilities and deployment scale. Velnara's excitement was visible in the rapid movement of her tentacles. Do you recall any details about these experimental systems? Even fragments could help us understand human technological development. Mostly classified, Marcus replied with apparent regret. Security protocols were very strict. I know they existed, but operational details were restricted to specific clearance levels. His careful deflection served multiple purposes. It explained why he couldn't provide detailed information, while suggesting that such information might exist in other sources. Most importantly, it reinforced the Coalition's perception that human military technology, while impressive for its time, remained within comprehensible parameters. The reality was that humanity's military drives could cross galactic distances in time frames that would have terrified Coalition strategists. The Enhanced Operations Division had routinely conducted operations in regions of space that the Coalition considered unreachable with their current technology. As Marcus's second week aboard the station began, he noticed subtle changes in the staff's behavior toward him. The initial excitement of first contact was giving way to routine scientific observation. Security measures remained minimal, consisting mainly of monitoring systems designed to ensure his health and safety rather than prevent escape attempts. This casual approach to his containment would have been impossible if the Coalition understood what they were dealing with. Marcus's enhanced physiology included modifications that could overcome virtually any restraint system they might employ. His neural implants contained technical specifications for weapons and defensive systems that exceeded coalition military capabilities by several generations. Most critically, his training included protocols for operations behind enemy lines that would allow him to gather intelligence and establish communication with humanity's hidden forces. The question that occupied his enhanced cognitive systems was whether such communication was advisable. 3 centuries of isolation had been intended to allow humanity time to develop responses to threats that conventional military force couldn't address. Revealing their survival prematurely could compromise operations that were still in progress. During his 3rd week, Marcus made his first major discovery about current galactic conditions. While reviewing coalition astronomical surveys, he identified energy signatures in the dead zones that matched patterns from humanity's classified threat assessments. The enemies that had driven humanity into hiding weren't just dormant, they were showing signs of renewed activity. Dr. Zilkoth noticed his increased interest in astronomical data during one of their sessions. "The star chart seemed to fascinate you, Sergeant Chen. Are you trying to locate familiar systems?" "Something like that," Marcus replied, maintaining his cover while processing the implications of what he had found. "Some of these energy readings look familiar, but I can't place where I might have seen similar patterns." The truth was that Marcus recognized the signatures immediately. They matched the exotic energy emissions produced by entities that humanity had designated as priority alpha threats. The fact that these readings were increasing in intensity and frequency suggested that whatever containment measures had been implemented 3 centuries ago were beginning to fail. This discovery fundamentally changed Marcus's mission parameters. The Enhanced Operations Division's protocols included specific instructions for situations where dormant threats showed signs of reactivation. The survival of galactic civilization, including humanity's hidden communities, might depend on whether the coalition could be prepared for what was coming. The problem was that preparing the coalition would require revealing capabilities that humanity had spent 3 centuries keeping secret. It would mean admitting that the peaceful, extinct species they thought they were studying had actually been something far more formidable. It would mean explaining that humanity's apparent self-destruction had been a carefully orchestrated withdrawal designed to hide the development of technologies that other species would find terrifying. Marcus's enhanced systems ran continuous probability analyses on potential courses of action. Every scenario involving full disclosure carried significant risks to humanity's strategic position. But scenarios involving continued secrecy, while the threat signatures strengthened, led to outcomes that were unacceptably catastrophic. As his 4th week began, Marcus realized he needed to make contact with humanity's hidden command structure. The Coalition's peaceful innocence was about to collide with realities that they were completely unprepared to face. Whether humanity emerged from hiding or remained in the shadows, decisions needed to be made by authorities far above his clearance level. The challenge was establishing communication without alerting Coalition monitoring systems to the fact that their extinct human specimen was actually an active military asset with capabilities that rendered their security measures completely ineffective. Marcus allowed himself another slight smile as he reviewed the station's communication protocols. The Coalition's trusting nature would make his task much easier than it should have been. They had given a predator access to their systems while believing they were caring for a helpless survivor. Soon, they would learn the difference. Marcus initiated his first covert communication attempt during the station's rest cycle, when most of the Coalition staff was in dormancy phases appropriate to their species. The research station's computer systems maintained minimal automated monitoring during these periods, creating windows of opportunity for someone with enhanced neural interfaces and 3 centuries of accumulated security protocols. His approach was subtle, beginning with what appeared to be innocent curiosity about communication systems. During a session with Dr. Kexthar, Marcus had mentioned feeling isolated and wondering if there might be ways to record messages for posterity, in case other human survivors were ever found. "An excellent suggestion," Kexthar had responded enthusiastically. "Preserving your memories and experiences would be invaluable for historical research. I'll arrange access to our communication arrays so you can record whatever you feel is important." The Coalition's trusting nature continued to work in Marcus's favor. They provided him with access to systems that could have compromised their security, if they had understood what they were dealing with. Instead, they saw only a traumatized survivor seeking connection with his lost heritage. Marcus's first real challenge was determining whether humanity's hidden command structure was still operational after 3 centuries. The Enhanced Operations Division had established communication protocols designed to survive extended periods of civilizational disruption. But 300 years was beyond even their most pessimistic planning scenarios. The protocols relied on a combination of exotic physics and careful signal routing that would appear as natural cosmic phenomena to most observers. Marcus's neural implants contained the necessary encoding algorithms, but he needed to access powerful enough transmission equipment to reach the designated contact points. His opportunity came when Dr. Velnara invited him to observe a routine deep space survey mission. The Coalition used their research stations to coordinate long-range astronomical observations, projects that required the kind of high-powered communication arrays Marcus needed for his purposes. Human space was in this general direction, Velnara explained, gesturing toward a section of the galactic map. We're conducting surveys to identify any remaining artifacts or installations that might provide additional historical information. Marcus maintained his expression of melancholy interest, while his enhanced systems analyzed the survey equipment. The Coalition's arrays were more powerful than necessary for simple astronomical observation, suggesting capabilities that could reach the coordinates he needed. Could I observe the survey process? Marcus asked. Seeing the regions where my people lived might help with memory recovery. Of course, Velnara replied. The experience might indeed trigger additional recollections. We'll begin the next survey cycle in 2 days. Those 2 days gave Marcus time to prepare his transmission carefully. The message needed to accomplish several critical objectives while maintaining operational security. It had to identify him as an active EOD asset, provide current intelligence about galactic conditions, and request guidance on engagement protocols with the Coalition. More challenging was the question of authentication. 3 centuries was long enough for communication codes to have changed multiple times. Marcus's neural implants contained authentication protocols from his deployment period, but whether those credentials would still be recognized was uncertain. The survey session provided perfect cover for his transmission attempt. As Coalition scientists focused their instruments on distant star systems, Marcus used his access to the communication controls to piggyback his encoded message onto their routine data streams. The message itself would appear as minor fluctuations in the cosmic background radiation, detectable only by receivers specifically configured to recognize the embedded patterns. To Coalition monitoring systems, it would register as natural variations in the signals they were already observing. Marcus embedded multiple copies of his message in different data streams, increasing the probability that at least one would reach its intended destination. The content was necessarily brief but included essential information: his current location, the Coalition's discovery of human installations, and the energy signatures he had detected in the dead zones. 3 days passed with no response. Marcus began to consider the possibility that humanity's hidden command structure had been disbanded or relocated beyond the reach of his transmission capabilities. The Enhanced Operations Division had always planned for the possibility that individual assets might remain isolated indefinitely, but the prospect of operating without guidance in such a complex situation was daunting. On the 4th day, Dr. Zilkoth noticed changes in Marcus's behavior that the medical officer interpreted as signs of depression and anxiety. You seem troubled, Sergeant Chen. Are the memory recovery sessions causing distress? I've been thinking about the possibility that I might truly be alone, Marcus replied, using his emotional state as cover for his actual concerns. If humanity is extinct, then everything we fought for, everything we sacrificed was meaningless. Zilkoth's expression conveyed sympathy that was genuine despite the species barrier. Your existence gives meaning to their sacrifices. Through you, something of human achievement and culture survives that is not meaningless. The Coalition's compassionate nature continued to impress Marcus even as he maintained his deception. These were beings who had achieved something remarkable in creating a peaceful, cooperative civilization. The irony that his presence might ultimately endanger everything they had built was not lost on him. His response came during his 7th day of waiting. embedded in routine communication traffic that the station received from Coalition headquarters. The signal was so subtle that even his enhanced systems almost missed it, disguised as natural fluctuations in a data stream about resource allocation schedules. The authentication codes were current, indicating that humanity's command structure remained operational and had maintained security protocols across 3 centuries of isolation. More importantly, the response contained updated communication parameters and an authorization code that granted Marcus significant operational discretion. The message was brief, but clear. Situation acknowledged. Threat assessment confirmed. Maintain current cover. Prepare Coalition for graduated disclosure on your authority. Stand by for support assets. Marcus felt a combination of relief and apprehension as he processed the implications. Humanity was not only alive, but apparently thriving enough to maintain sophisticated intelligence operations. The mention of support assets suggested that he would not remain isolated indefinitely. However, the instruction to prepare Coalition for graduated disclosure represented a fundamental shift in mission parameters. Instead of maintaining simple cover while gathering intelligence, he was being tasked with beginning the process of revealing humanity's survival to the Coalition. This would require careful management to avoid panic while ensuring they could be prepared for the awakening threats in the dead zones. The authorization for graduated disclosure also meant that Marcus could begin revealing some of his actual capabilities, though he would need to do so in ways that didn't immediately terrify his hosts. The Coalition's peaceful nature would make them naturally inclined to trust him, but that same peaceful nature might make them unprepared for the realities he would eventually need to reveal. Marcus spent the following days developing his approach carefully. He needed to begin demonstrating capabilities beyond what a normal human survivor should possess while maintaining plausible explanations for these abilities. The Enhanced Operations Division had prepared cover stories for various disclosure scenarios, but none had anticipated dealing with a civilization as genuinely peaceful as the Coalition. His first step was to begin showing improved recall of his military service, claiming that the therapeutic sessions were helping recover memories damaged by the enhancement process. This would allow him to gradually reveal more sophisticated knowledge while maintaining his cover story. "I'm starting to remember more about the enhancement procedures," he told Dr. Kexthar during their next session. "The physical modifications were more extensive than I initially recalled. They weren't just muscle and bone improvements." Kexthar's interest was immediate. "What kind of additional modifications do you remember?" "Neural interfaces," Marcus replied carefully. "Systems that enhanced reaction time and information processing. I think there were also communication implants, though I'm not sure how they functioned." This revelation would provide cover for future demonstrations of enhanced capabilities while suggesting that Marcus's abilities were the result of historical human technology rather than ongoing operations. It was the first step in a process that would eventually reveal to the Coalition that their understanding of humanity had been fundamentally incomplete. The question that remained was whether the Coalition would be able to accept the truth about what humanity had become, and whether they could be prepared for the threats that were beginning to stir in the darkness between the stars. The change in Marcus's behavior became apparent to the Coalition researchers during his 6th week aboard the station. What they interpreted as successful therapeutic recovery was actually the beginning of his graduated disclosure protocol. His enhanced memory recall provided perfect cover for revealing increasingly sophisticated knowledge about human capabilities. "The neural interfaces are more active now," Marcus told Dr. Kexthar during a routine session, allowing a note of surprise to enter his voice. "I'm receiving what seem to be system diagnostics. Status reports on implants I didn't know I had." Kexthar's optical sensors focused intently on Marcus's readings. "Fascinating. The therapeutic process appears to be reactivating dormant systems. Are you experiencing any discomfort or unusual sensations?" "No discomfort," Marcus replied truthfully. "But I'm accessing information that doesn't feel like memory. It's more like consulting a database. Technical specifications, tactical assessments, communication protocols." What Marcus didn't reveal was that his neural systems had always been fully functional. The reactivation was simply his decision to stop hiding certain capabilities from Coalition monitoring equipment. Each revelation was carefully calculated to prepare them for greater truths while maintaining plausible explanations for his abilities. Dr. Velnara joined the sessions more frequently as Marcus's apparent capabilities expanded. Her xenoarchaeological expertise made her particularly interested in the implications of his revelations for understanding human technological development. These neural interfaces suggest computational capabilities far beyond what we attributed to human civilization, she observed during one discussion. The integration with biological systems indicates mastery of technologies that the coalition has only recently achieved. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. I think human military development was more advanced than civilian technology suggested. The enhancement program must have been using experimental systems that weren't widely deployed. This explanation served multiple purposes. It accounted for the sophistication of his augmentations while suggesting that such technology had been limited in scope and availability. It also implied that the coalition's historical understanding, based on civilian installations and commercial vessels, had provided an incomplete picture of human capabilities. The gradual revelation of his abilities allowed Marcus to begin demonstrating enhanced pattern recognition and analytical capabilities. When reviewing astronomical data with the research team, he began identifying anomalies and correlations that their automated systems had missed. This energy signature pattern, Marcus said during one survey session, indicating a specific data set. It reminds me of something from military briefings. Threat assessment protocols mentioned similar readings in connection with, I can't recall the exact classification, but it was considered significant. Dr. Zilkoth examined the data Marcus had highlighted. The pattern was subtle, embedded in what appeared to be natural cosmic background radiation. Coalition analysis algorithms had classified it as unremarkable, but Marcus's identification suggested it might represent something more important. Your enhanced pattern recognition systems seem to be detecting correlations our equipment missed, Zilkoth observed. This could represent a significant advancement in our analytical capabilities. Marcus carefully suppressed a smile. His identification of the energy signatures was based on 3 centuries of human intelligence about entities that the coalition had never encountered. The patterns weren't just significant, they represented early warning signs of threats that could destroy their civilization. As his apparent capabilities continued to expand, Marcus began dropping hints about the nature of humanity's military priorities. The Enhanced Operations Division's cover stories included references to external threats that had driven human militarization, threats that existed beyond the boundaries of coalition space. I remember briefings about contact protocols, Marcus said during one session, his voice carrying the hesitation of someone struggling with incomplete recollections. Procedures for dealing with entities that weren't like us. Not just alien species, but things that operated according to different principles. Velnara's tentacles quivered with excitement. First contact protocols with unknown species? This could explain why human military development was so accelerated. You were preparing for encounters with civilizations beyond your current knowledge. Maybe, Marcus replied carefully. But the briefing suggested these weren't civilizations in any sense we understood. The protocols were defensive, focused on containment rather than communication. This revelation represented a crucial step in preparing the coalition for eventual disclosure about the threats in the dead zones. Marcus was establishing the foundation for explaining why humanity had developed such advanced military capabilities and why their apparent extinction might have been something other than self-destruction. The coalition's response to these hints revealed both their scientific curiosity and their fundamental lack of preparation for the realities Marcus was gradually unveiling. They approached his revelations with the same peaceful methodology they applied to all discoveries, seeking to understand and categorize rather than preparing for potential dangers. Marcus's communication with humanity's command structure continued through subtle exchanges embedded in routine data traffic. The responses provided updated threat assessments and authorization for accelerated disclosure timelines. The energy signatures in the dead zones were strengthening more rapidly than anticipated, suggesting that whatever had been contained there for 3 centuries was approaching some form of activation threshold. During his 8th week aboard the station, Marcus received authorization to begin revealing defensive capabilities. This represented a significant escalation in the disclosure protocol. but one that command deemed necessary given the developing threat situation. His opportunity came during a routine medical examination when Dr. Zilkoth's equipment detected unusual readings from Marcus's muscular and skeletal systems. The enhanced soldier's augmentations included defensive modifications that had remained dormant during his early weeks of apparent recovery. "These readings are remarkable," Zilkoth observed, studying the scan results. "Your bone density and muscle fiber composition show values that exceed theoretical maximums for human physiology. The integration with synthetic materials is more extensive than we initially detected." Marcus allowed himself to appear surprised by this information. "The enhancement program modified more than I remembered. These readings suggest capabilities that seem excessive for normal military operations." "Excessive how?" Velnara asked, her scientific curiosity overriding caution. Marcus demonstrated by casually bending a piece of medical equipment that should have required significant force to deform. The metal yielded to his grip like soft clay, yet his movements remained completely controlled and precise. "Enhanced strength was part of the modification package," Marcus explained, setting down the bent instrument. "I'm starting to remember the testing phases. We were being prepared for operations in extreme environments against opponents that standard human capabilities couldn't address. The demonstration had its intended effect. The Coalition researchers realized they were dealing with capabilities that fundamentally exceeded their previous understanding of human potential. More importantly, Marcus's casual explanation suggested that such enhancements had been necessary responses to specific threats rather than arbitrary military development. "What kind of opponents required such extreme preparations?" Kexthar asked, his translator struggling with concepts that had no equivalent in Coalition experience. "I wish I could remember more clearly," Marcus replied with apparent frustration. "The briefings were classified and the enhancement process affected memory formation. But I recall references to entities that didn't follow normal physical laws, things that conventional weapons couldn't affect. This explanation planted seeds for future revelations about the nature of the threats humanity had faced. It also began preparing the Coalition for the possibility that their peaceful galaxy might contain dangers they had never imagined." As Marcus's 9th week began, he received intelligence that changed everything. The energy signatures in the dead zones weren't just strengthening, they were beginning to move. Whatever containment measures humanity had implemented 3 centuries ago were failing, and the entities responsible for humanity's original militarization were showing signs of renewed activity. The time for gradual disclosure was ending. Soon Marcus would need to reveal not just humanity's survival, but the fact that the peaceful galaxy the Coalition had enjoyed was about to face threats that would test their civilization's ability to survive. The question was whether 3 centuries of peace had left them capable of adapting to the realities that were emerging from the darkness between the stars. The emergency signal reached Marcus during what should have been a routine therapeutic session with Dr. Kexthar. His neural implants detected the coded transmission embedded in the station's communication traffic, and the priority level made his enhanced cardiovascular system spike briefly before his training reasserted control. The message was stark in its urgency. "Dead zone breach confirmed. Entity emergence imminent. Immediate disclosure authorized. Prepare for contact." Marcus's careful facade of gradual recovery ended in that moment. The luxury of slow revelation was gone, replaced by operational necessity that overrode 3 centuries of careful secrecy. The Coalition needed to understand what was coming, and they needed to understand it now. "Dr. Kexthar," Marcus said, his voice carrying an authority that hadn't been present during their previous sessions. "I need you to contact Dr. Velnara and Dr. Zilkoth immediately. Also, please connect me to your station commander. What I'm about to tell you will require immediate escalation to Coalition leadership." The change in Marcus's demeanor was so complete that Kexthar's optical sensors dilated in surprise. The confused, traumatized survivor had been replaced by someone who radiated competence and command authority. The transformation was unsettling in its completeness. "Sergeant Chen, are you experiencing some form of medical episode?" Kexthar asked, his medical training overriding his confusion. "Your vital signs show significant changes from baseline readings." "My vital signs are optimal," Marcus replied. What you're seeing is the activation of systems that have been dormant during my recovery period. Please make those contacts. We don't have much time. Something in Marcus's tone convinced Kexthar to comply. Within minutes, the senior research staff had assembled in the main conference chamber. Station Commander Thexmol, a veteran administrator whose species prided itself on calm deliberation, entered the room with visible irritation at having his schedule disrupted. Dr. Kexthar indicated that our human specimen has urgent information requiring my attention, Thexmol said, his translator conveying his skepticism. I hope this represents a genuine emergency, rather than psychological distress requiring medical intervention. Marcus stood, and his posture alone conveyed that the being before them was no longer the confused survivor they had been studying. Every movement suggested controlled power and tactical awareness that made the coalition officers unconsciously step back. Commander Thexmol, what I'm about to tell you will fundamentally change the coalition's understanding of galactic history and current threats, Marcus began. Humanity is not extinct. Our apparent destruction 3 centuries ago was a strategic withdrawal designed to allow us time to prepare for threats that conventional military force could not address. The silence that followed was profound. Dr. Velnara's tentacles had frozen in mid-motion, while Kexthar's optical sensors cycled through different focal lengths as if trying to resolve an impossible image. That's impossible, Thexmol finally managed. Coalition surveys have confirmed human extinction. Earth is a devastated wasteland. No human colonies have shown signs of activity. Because we designed it that way, Marcus replied. The devastation on Earth was carefully orchestrated. Our colonies were evacuated and concealed. The Enhanced Operations Division, of which I am a member, was tasked with ensuring that humanity disappeared completely from galactic observation. Marcus activated his neural interfaces openly for the first time, allowing his true capabilities to become visible to Coalition monitoring equipment. The readings that flooded their displays showed cognitive processing rates and physical capabilities that exceeded anything in their databases. The individual you've been studying for the past 2 months is not a primitive human survivor, Marcus continued. I am an enhanced soldier from a military division that was created to fight threats that existed beyond the boundaries of Coalition space. My awakening was not accidental, it was a planned activation in response to specific danger. Signals. Dr. Zilkoth's medical scanner was registering readings that should have been impossible for any biological entity. The modifications to your systems are far beyond what our historical records suggested human technology could achieve. Your historical records were based on what we wanted you to find, Marcus explained. Human civilian technology was intentionally limited to create the impression of a primitive species. Our actual capabilities were classified at levels that required complete concealment from potential observers. Velnara found her voice first among the researchers. Why? Why conceal your survival and capabilities? What threats could justify such an elaborate deception? Marcus gestured toward the astronomical displays showing the dead zones that Coalition surveys had avoided for centuries. Those regions that your people classify as natural hazards contain entities that violate every assumption about biological and technological limitations. 3 centuries ago, they were actively expanding into inhabited space. Conventional military force proved inadequate against them. What kind of entities? Thexmol demanded, his administrative composure beginning to crack. Beings that exist partially outside normal space-time, Marcus replied. They consume energy on a stellar scale and convert matter into forms that serve their purposes. They're intelligent in ways that make communication impossible and hostile in ways that make coexistence unthinkable. The Coalition officers exchanged glances that reflected their struggle to process information that challenged their fundamental understanding of the universe. Their peaceful civilization had never encountered threats that required the kind of military solutions Marcus was describing. Humanity's rapid militarization wasn't driven by internal conflicts. Marcus continued, we were fighting a shadow war against entities that made our survival questionable. When conventional approaches failed, we developed the Enhanced Operations Division and technologies that operated on principles beyond Coalition understanding. And you've been containing these entities for 3 centuries? Kexthar asked, his medical training helping him focus on practical implications rather than philosophical questions. Containing and studying them, Marcus confirmed. The strategic withdrawal allowed us to develop responses that weren't possible while maintaining galactic visibility. But our containment measures are beginning to fail. The entities are showing signs of renewed expansion. Marcus accessed his communication implants openly, connecting to channels that had remained hidden during his weeks of apparent recovery. The response was immediate: authorization, codes, and operational parameters that confirmed his authority to speak for humanity's hidden forces. I have been authorized to offer the Coalition Limited Alliance in addressing the emerging threat, Marcus announced. However, this will require accepting that your understanding of galactic history and current reality contains significant gaps. Thexmol's administrative experience finally reasserted itself. What exactly are you proposing? What would this alliance entail? Immediate evacuation of populated systems near the dead zones, Marcus replied. Enhanced defensive preparations using technologies that humanity will provide. And acceptance that the peaceful period the Coalition has enjoyed is ending. The stark nature of his demands hit the assembled Coalition officers like a physical blow. Their entire civilization was built on peaceful cooperation and scientific advancement. The idea of preparing for warfare against incomprehensible entities challenged everything they believed about the nature of galactic civilization. How do we know any of this is true? Velnara asked, her scientific training demanding evidence. These claims about hidden threats and concealed human survival require extraordinary proof. Marcus smiled, and for the first time, it was not the careful expression of a careful actor, but the genuine response of a soldier who had been waiting for this moment. You'll have your proof soon enough, he said. My activation was triggered because the entities have begun emerging from containment. Coalition sensors should start detecting anomalous readings in the dead zones within days. When that happens, you'll understand why humanity developed soldiers like me. As if summoned by his words, the station's communication systems activated with incoming priority transmissions from Coalition deep space monitoring stations. The messages were confused and frightened, reporting energy readings and spatial distortions that violated every known principle of astrophysics. Marcus examined the incoming data with professional interest. It's beginning, he said simply. The question now is whether the Coalition can adapt quickly enough to survive what's coming. The peaceful galaxy that had existed for 3 centuries was about to discover why humanity had been willing to fake its own extinction to prepare for this moment. The Coalition's response to Marcus's revelations unfolded with characteristic deliberation that made him increasingly anxious as reports from the dead zones grew more alarming. Emergency sessions of the Coalition Council convened across multiple star systems, but their decision-making process was designed for peaceful diplomacy, rather than rapid military response, Commander. Thexmol had transformed from skeptical administrator to crisis coordinator within hours of receiving confirmation from Coalition monitoring stations. The spatial distortions and energy readings emerging from previously dead sectors matched Marcus's warnings with terrifying accuracy. Our deep space sensors are detecting massive gravitational anomalies in 17 different dead zone sectors, Thexmol reported during an emergency briefing. The energy signatures are unlike anything in Coalition databases, but they match patterns that Sergeant Chen identified weeks ago. Dr. Velnara had thrown herself into analyzing the incoming data with the intensity of someone whose worldview was being systematically dismantled. The readings suggest structures that shouldn't be possible. We're seeing matter conversion on stellar scales and space-time distortions that violate our understanding of physics. Marcus reviewed the Coalition's sensor data with growing concern. The entity emergence was proceeding faster than humanity's worst-case projections had anticipated. 3 centuries of containment had apparently only delayed rather than resolved the threat. The entities are testing the boundaries of their previous containment, Marcus explained to the assembled Coalition leadership via holographic conference. What you're seeing now is preliminary reconnaissance. The actual emergence will be exponentially more significant. Coalition representatives from dozens of species struggled to comprehend the implications of his briefing. Their peaceful civilization had no framework for understanding threats that operated beyond conventional physical laws. What exactly are we facing? Asked Counselor Vexandra, whose species had been among the Coalition's founding members. Your descriptions suggest entities that transcend normal biological and technological categories. Marcus chose his words carefully, knowing that too much information too quickly could paralyze the coalition with despair. Think of them as a form of life that evolved in regions where the normal rules of space-time don't apply consistently. They expand by converting matter and energy into forms that serve their purposes. They're intelligent, but their intelligence operates according to principles that make communication or negotiation impossible. How did humanity develop the capability to contain such entities? Pressed Dr. Kexthar, whose medical background made him focus on practical solutions. 3 centuries of dedicated research and development, Marcus replied. Our withdrawal from galactic civilization allowed us to pursue technologies that would have been considered too dangerous for populated space. We've learned to manipulate some of the same exotic physics that the entities use. What Marcus didn't reveal was the full scope of humanity's transformation during their period of isolation. The Enhanced Operations Division represented only the beginning of modifications that had reshaped human civilization in ways that would be difficult for the Coalition to accept. Humanity had become something that their peaceful neighbors might find as unsettling as the entities themselves. The first direct demonstration of human capabilities came when Marcus's support assets arrived at the research station. The vessel that materialized without warning in the station's vicinity was unlike anything in Coalition databases. It appeared to exist in a state of controlled spatial distortion that made accurate sensor readings impossible. Coalition Station HFY. This is human military vessel Prometheus. The communication came in perfect Coalition standard, despite no record of human vessels possessing such linguistic capabilities. We are here to extract Enhanced Operations Division asset Marcus Chen and provide technical assistance as authorized by Emergency Alliance protocols. Commander Thexmol's confusion was evident in his response. Human vessel, our records indicate no scheduled arrivals. Please identify yourself according to Coalition navigation protocols. Commander, your protocols don't apply to our operational parameters. The response came with polite firmness. We exist outside Coalition jurisdictional frameworks. Asset Chen, please prepare for extraction and briefing. Marcus turned to the Coalition officers who had become his inadvertent hosts. I need to coordinate with my command structure, but I'll return with technical specifications that should help prepare your defenses. The alliance I mentioned is your best chance for survival. The brief reunion with humanity's hidden forces provided Marcus with updated intelligence that was both reassuring and terrifying. Humanity had indeed survived and thrived during their centuries of isolation, developing technologies that made their original capabilities seem primitive. However, the entity emergence was proceeding along patterns that suggested coordinated intelligence rather than random expansion. The situation is more complex than we initially assessed. Commander Sarah Hayes briefed Marcus aboard the Prometheus. The entities aren't just escaping. Containment. They're being directed by something that learned. From our previous engagement patterns, Marcus processed this information while reviewing 3 centuries of human technological development. The Enhanced Operations Division had expanded into something resembling a separate branch of human evolution, with modifications that pushed the boundaries of what could still be considered human. The Coalition species show promise, Marcus reported. They've achieved genuine peaceful cooperation across multiple star systems. Their technology is sophisticated in civilian applications, though their military capabilities are minimal. Can they be prepared quickly enough? Hayes asked, studying the Coalition's technical specifications. Unknown, Marcus admitted. Their peaceful nature makes them naturally cooperative, but it also leaves them psychologically unprepared for the kind of warfare we're facing. They'll need both technological assistance and fundamental changes in their strategic thinking. The return to Coalition space brought Marcus back to researchers who had spent 3 days processing the reality that their understanding of galactic history was fundamentally incomplete. The Coalition's leadership had reluctantly voted to accept humanity's alliance offer, though many representatives remained skeptical about claims they couldn't fully comprehend. The alliance terms are straightforward, Marcus explained during his final briefing to Coalition leadership. Humanity will provide defensive technologies and tactical expertise. In exchange, the Coalition provides manufacturing capability and territorial access for defensive installations. What kind of defensive technologies? Asked Counselor Thexvara, whose engineering background made her focus on practical details. Marcus activated a holographic display showing schematics that made the coalition engineers recoil in shock. The designs incorporated physics principles that their science considered theoretical at best, combined in ways that suggested mastery of forces beyond their current understanding. These systems will allow you to detect entity presence before they achieve full manifestation, Marcus explained. Early warning will provide time for evacuation or defensive preparation. The installations will also generate field effects that can disrupt entity expansion patterns. Dr. Velnara studied the schematics with the fascination of someone confronting concepts that challenged her fundamental assumptions about reality. These designs suggest that you've learned to manipulate space-time itself. How is such technology possible? 3 centuries of necessity, Marcus replied simply. When conventional physics proves inadequate against the threats you're facing, you develop unconventional solutions. Humanity learned to adapt. The first entity manifestation occurred while Marcus was coordinating the installation of human defensive systems in coalition space. A monitoring station in Sector 7 reported the appearance of structures that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, converting asteroids and space debris into configurations that served incomprehensible purposes. Coalition forces attempted standard defensive responses, but their weapons proved completely ineffective against entities that existed partially outside normal space-time. The monitoring station was consumed within hours, its crew providing final transmissions that described reality breaking down around them. This is what humanity faced 3 centuries ago, Marcus explained to coalition leadership as they watched the destruction unfold. Conventional military responses are useless against entities that don't follow the rules of normal existence. The reality of the threat finally convinced the coalition's remaining skeptics. Within days, human defensive installations were being constructed across coalition space using technologies that their engineers struggled to understand but recognized as their only hope for survival. As the first joint human coalition defensive operations began, Marcus reflected on the irony of the situation. Humanity had faked extinction to develop the capability to face this threat, while the coalition had enjoyed 3 centuries of peace made possible by humanity's hidden sacrifice. Now, as entities began emerging from containment across multiple sectors, both civilizations would discover whether their alliance could preserve not just their